Okay.
Welcome back to the Six Steel City Rings podcast, episode 5. My name is Ray Whiting, and with me I have both Leanne Lohman and Bob Quinn, both senior staff writers for Steeler Nation. Guys, how you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Again, welcome.
I'm gonna say it up front today. One second, Ray. I'm gonna say it up front today. Like, share, and subscribe to this video.
If you're here, help us out.
Yes. If you have any questions, any comments, or anything, please email us. Email the show at 6steelcityrings@yahoo.com. All right? Let's go to work. Guys, Diontae Johnson, he is gone. He's been traded to the Carolina Panthers with in exchange for a draft pick and Diontae Jackson, defensive back. Guys, I've been thinking about this for quite some time, and yes, I really felt that Diontae's days were numbered in Pittsburgh, and given the fact that he's been arguing with teammates in the locker room, just his play and the many drop passes in my book, and then of course I think that the final nail in the coffin was when that fumble in the Cincinnati Bengal game, and I mean he just walked, just made no attempt to even try to go after the ball, and I believe that's the cardinal sin in the organization with the Steelers. But I do have a little devil's advocate about that. I'm gonna come back to that, but first I will get your insight on the Diontae Johnson trade.
Well, I can tell you that it's not unexpected. I thought there was a great line, and I was looking it up on social media. Somebody, he's a comedian on Twitter, had a great line that, hey, Diontae Johnson's headed to Carolina, but I bet you he goes backwards first, something along those lines. I'm probably flubbing the line out, so I was looking for the exact line, but I thought it was funny that they were making jokes about him going out of town. He had 1 year left on his deal, $18 million. We essentially swapped him for another expiring deal. I think we save a little bit of money, although there's some talk that maybe when the final details come out, that it's not just 300,000 or 400,000 we save, that maybe Carolina will pay some of the freight. I mean, I don't think we can undersell the pick swap either. I mean, we basically moved up 50 spots in the draft. Doesn't seem like much, but it could put us in play for some real help in the 6th round. Whereas the 240th pick in the draft is, it's a roll of the dice. 198, still a little bit of roll of the dice, but there's some good talent to be had there, and it could.
Those are slightly weighted dice.
Yeah, exactly. And Leanne, you talked about maybe them wanting to take a flyer on Christian McCaffrey's brother out of Rice because of the Ray Fittipaldo mock draft. And it puts him in play now. I mean, it's a little bit lower than where people are thinking, but that's kind of his value.
Yeah, I think it makes it a reasonable pick if that's somebody that they're really interested in. I don't know. I wasn't one of the people that was really ragging on Diontae Johnson and thought he was this like cancerous person. Do you know what I mean? The people that I hear that are in the locker room that I trust, speak about him, they disagree with that. They don't, they say they don't see him that way. The team doesn't see him that way, that he's somebody who really is quite positive. But, I also look at it and feel like it would be hard to blame the guy. Like he has not had an easy road. He had the issues with the drops. I don't know. You can't fault him for how hard he worked to come back from that, out there catching tennis balls and all of these things. I felt like he busted his butt to get back there. He endured the quarterback change, and I think that he lost a lot of targets in that situation for whatever the reason is. And then, I think on top of that, just flat out weren't throwing to the ball. The offensive schemes were terrible. I think he suffered in every way with what's gone on in the offense the past 2-3 years. And so I have a hard time faulting him for feeling frustrated, but The other hand, you have to know when to talk and when to keep your mouth shut. And I don't think he did himself any favors talking about being a hold in and all of these things if Mason didn't get signed. You gotta be a team player, and you gotta know when to just, kind of keep your mouth shut. So I agree. I think we, kind of saw the writing on the wall for him that this was coming. I hope it offers him a fresh start, in a new team. He's been a productive wide receiver. I think he has a lot of potential. So maybe this is the fresh start he needs, but I think it's also the fresh start the Steelers offense needs, and to not have any baggage carrying forward into Arthur Smith's new offense.
And, the Diontae Jackson's being a little bit undersold.
Yes.
He's had injury problems, but he's still one of the fastest corners in the NFL. And I think play wise, he's what they thought they were going to get in Pat Pete. He's definitely faster than Pat Pete.
Yeah.
He's maybe not as good in man coverage, but I think Pat Pete might have been the better mentor for Joey Porter Jr., but Diontae Jackson is the better player to put next to him. And I also like that the fact that if they do decide to go corner early in the draft, or even in the mid rounds with a guy like McGlothern from Arkansas, who I love, there's some real, there's skill set with Jackson to move inside. He can play the nickel and he can play it well. So if he starts out as the number 2, kind of moves into the number 3, I really think there's some value there. Diontae with Bryce Young, I don't know how great that's going to work. He's an upgrade over Adam Thielen, who's still there. It gives Bryce Young some better weapons. But I really, I don't think we can undersell that pick 198. I mean, if we could get a guy like LeVron Hopper or the McCaffrey brother, or there's some other guys down there, and it depends how the draft shakes out, we could really end up getting a decent 2-for-1 there. I don't know that Carolina is going to get anybody great with 240, but if you told me Brock Purdy was going to be the best quarterback in the Kenny Pickett draft, I wouldn't have believed you. And he
wouldn't have believed it.
Yeah.
Pat P's been all over the media and ESPN and everything. Was on Good Morning Football this morning talking about how he had this great conversation with Mike Tomlin and the door isn't closed. He wants this 14th season really badly. He wants a Super Bowl. He believes he can get it in Pittsburgh. He talked about being willing to take a pay cut, and said that he really, on his podcast the other day, said he really sold himself to Mike Tomlin as being like critical for Joey Porter Jr.'s development, being this like leader role model to help him. Do you think that this trade closes the door on any chance of him coming back as a depth piece?
No, I don't think so. No, because he's they've only got really 2 corners at this point. If Pat Peterson, I don't see him being in the top 3. He could maybe fit in as the 4th corner, kind of a mentor. A defensive backfield coach who they are paying a minimal salary. I mean, if he's willing to come back and play for, a couple $1 million, around the veteran minimum, maybe a little bit more.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't go wrong putting a guy like that in your locker room.
Right.
Feels like a win-win. Yeah. It feels like a win-win to have him back cheap.
It is. Going back to Diontae Johnson, Leanne, and I'm gonna push back a little bit on what you said about Diontae. You said that it's not his fault. He dug his own hole. And I put him in the same conversation. Bud Dupree. There we go. Now, the first few years, what did Diontae do along with Bud Dupree? I mean, just lackadaisical. I mean, just mediocre. Here comes contract year. Now you got to produce. And what did Diontae do? I mean, he was training camp, catching tennis balls, work on his eye-to-hand contact. He was working on that. So when he got his money, he did backslide a little bit. But, and I read an article.
I don't know that I would agree with the backslide, right? Because he's been pretty consistent. He had the 1 year with no touchdowns, but I mean, virtually every year his catches went up. His yardage suffered a little bit, but his best year is obviously 21 with Ben with 107 and 1100. But then 22, 86 for 882. He only caught 51 balls last year, but he was hurt for a few games.
Right.
But Bob,
I don't know that you could say that's Bud Dupree was.
You got to throw the guy the ball. I mean, he's got to get opportunities. Do you know
Right,
what I mean? I think
right.
when he had opportunities, he performed better.
And I mean, and there were crucial moments. I mean, when the ball came his way, I mean, it dropped, and then that's what I'm looking at.
Well, that's really more his rookie year. I mean,
You
that he's had some key drops in the last couple of years where the worst possible time to drop, and then everybody just goes back to saying all he does is drop the ball.
Yeah.
It's really not true. He's much better at holding on to the ball, but he saves his very worst for the very worst times.
The Baltimore game last season in Baltimore, when Mason threw that quick strike pass to him, and he ran for a touchdown. And I'm thinking he's going to drop it. He's going to drop it. He didn't hit onto the ball. So great. And again, I wish Diontae the best. Sometimes, I mean, it was frustrating to watch him because, again, and see, I've always learned. I'm a student of the game. I played football in high school. My coach always told me, if your hands touch the ball, you better catch it.
He dropped 2 passes all last year.
So again, best wishes to him in Carolina. May he have a Pro Bowl season. We'll see. Guys, we talk about Pat P. Like I said, Pat P. Bring it back for mentoring purposes, because again, I feel that Joey Porter Jr. was well receptive to Pat P. And look how it paid off. So, but if you're gonna be Pat P back, put him as safety. Put him as safety. Don't put him at the corner, because
they don't need him in safety anymore. I mean,
Right.
not with I am blanking on the name.
new guy.
Leanne,
Yeah.
help me out. Who's the guy we signed today?
Oh, Deshaun
I got it. Yeah, there you go.
Deshaun Elliott, yeah.
Yeah.
So
He
he's a
did say
hitter.
he's willing. He did say he's willing to come back in that kind of hybrid role. Do you know what I mean? He's always been willing to do that. He said he was willing to do that even in his heyday in Arizona. They just never utilized him in that way, but he enjoyed moving all around the field in Pittsburgh last year.
Yeah.
Just looking at the free agent signings that they've signed so far, Omar Khan has really answered the call. He has, in a big way. I was a little bit worried at one point, but again, Omar, hey, props to him. This was well needed. I think, again, of course, you had to draft. I mean, you had to pick or assign based on experience. And of course, then when you come to the draft, with the rookies, you surround the rookies with good, experienced players to pass the baton when it's their turn. Next man up. Guys, I mean, there's so much to talk about right before the draft. We're like 1 month away, like six
Going back to Pat Pete right now, Ray, the one thing you got to remember is with really only 2 cornerbacks on the roster with Jackson and Joey Porter. And Corey Trice, we don't know what he is. He could turn out to be another very good player. But bringing in Patrick Peterson as right now, there would be some expectation, I think, on his part, if he's the third corner signed, that he's going to be on the field. If he wants to be a glorified coach emergency guy, yes, it's absolutely worth it to bring it back. But I always hesitate, a veteran player, especially a Hall of Fame caliber player like Peterson he says all the right things, but is he really going to be happy with standing on the sideline and watching, and just your job is just to make sure Porter's doing okay, and if something happens, we might toss you out there for a play or two? I mean, I think he's thinking I'll come back with a pay cut, and I think he has real expectations to still be on the field.
And that's the type of player you want in Pittsburgh, team first. And again,
he can be team first all he wants. He's not good enough to be an every down player on a playoff team.
Oh, and that's fine. And that's fine. Maybe the third down situations, but not right. Not 3 downs. No.
I don't even want him on the field on third down. I mean, unless it's a dime package.
Particularly not on third downs.
Yeah, he showed last year. He's just maybe it was just a bad year. I mean, it is possible he could, maybe get to training camp and show, okay, maybe I didn't play as well as I could have last year, and he
Yeah.
plays a little bit better. But I mean, the reality is he's a 34-year-old cornerback. He's a Hall of Fame
To me, he's
guy.
a guy we
Absolutely.
watch gradually decline over the years. You know what I mean? Father time is undefeated. You know what I mean? It's not like he had some massive injury and this like huge drop off. To me, he's kind of gradually, you know what I mean? Just slowly, like players do, kind of gone downhill as he's gotten older. I think it's normal, you know what I mean? And I probably imagine it's got to be a little hard. I mean, I watched him run in his 40 at the combine today. They showed it this morning running a 4.3. I mean, the guy was fast, and really talented. They showed all these crazy things he did like his rookie year. And, while he still has some of that juice in him, and we saw it in Pittsburgh, it is less consistent to the point where you can't count on him, at every down. But can only take people at their word. If he's willing to come back and do it on a minimal contract, you know what I mean? I think that's a pretty solid backup to have.
And I mean, let's face it, he's charismatic. His podcast it does well. I mean, his future is probably in the media.
Mhm.
I think if he wants to be a coach, he could be an outstanding coach. I mean, I would love to see, if that's the role he wants to play, hey, look, I'll take the vet minimum. I realize I'm the fifth cornerback. I'm just here to make sure the guys do well, and I'm your break glass in case of
Yeah.
emergency guy. If he's clear with that and wants to do it, I mean, then you're gaining something there. But if he signs a $2 or $3 million a year deal and says, "Hey, look, I understand I'm not getting paid what I used to, but I still need to be on the field," kind of like Joe Hayden. I think if Joe Hayden had accepted the reality that, hey, look, I'm not going to be the number one corner. I'm not even going to be the number two corner. I think if he'd accepted that reality, he probably still would have gotten a contract from Pittsburgh. But I
Right.
don't think anybody in Pittsburgh thought that Joe Hayden would accept being the third, fourth quarter on the roster.
No.
And in fairness to Hayden,
Right.
he said, you know what? If I'm a third guy, I'm retiring. I don't need it.
Yeah.
He made plenty of money, and now he spends his time being mad at the Steelers and loving on the Browns.
I did see him at the LA Rams game last season. He was on the sidelines, greeting some of the players like Cam Hayward and TJ Watt, and of course they met his kids. So I believe there's still some love there for him. He'll get over it. It's Joe
Yeah,
Hayden.
well,
Yeah.
with his teammates, I mean, I think he's got real hard feelings about how it ended in
Oh
Pittsburgh.
yeah.
But yeah, he'll probably get over that. But let's face it, he spent most of his career with the Browns. The fact that he considers himself a Brown really shouldn't be that
It's
much
not
of a
really
surprise.
surprising. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like he won anything with the Steelers. He just he got cut right before training camp. The Steelers were willing to pay him, and pretty close to what he was making.
Yeah.
So he came here and he played well for us. He
Yeah.
was definitely our best corner for 3 or 4 years.
Guys, let's talk about the free agent rumors. That's something that we really don't like to harp on, because we're Steeler fans. We don't harp on rumors. We harp on facts. But now, because again, the way Omar is working it, Russ, he's getting his chef hat ready because he's gonna start cooking here pretty soon. What's the rumor mill saying about the free agents for Pittsburgh?
Well,
I think. Go
Go ahead,
ahead.
Leah. No,
I was gonna say, I
you,
think we'd be.
I'll let you say the crazy ones.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Antonio Brown's CTSPN Twitter page and all of these rumors that they keep dropping into the ether that seem to be having some basis in truth, which is wild. I don't know if Brown has contacts and he's just spilling all the information out to everybody on Twitter or what, but he's talked about a few things. He's one who dropped Patrick Queen way early before that happened. Now he's talking about Tyler Boyd coming to the Steelers, as well as Justin Jefferson, which is crazy.
Yeah, I mean,
Justin Jefferson.
I would love to. I love the idea of Justin Jefferson, but I mean, you got to figure he's going to want 35 million plus. I mean, if you're lucky, and if they get him, George Pickens' career clock in Pittsburgh starts because there's no way you can afford Justin Jefferson and George Pickens after next year. Steelers are going to have a ton of cap room in 2025. They could afford Justin Jefferson. It's tight, but they could do it. And it's less tight next year when Cam Hayward comes off the books. It's possible. But I mean, you are handicapping your roster. I mean, unless you're just going to go like we did with Ben. We're going to spend money on the offense and stop spending money on the defense, which, let's face it, you just spent 14 mil a year on Patrick Queen. TJ's getting 30. Minka's getting 22. Cam's coming off the books at 22. But are the Steelers, I mean, maybe TJ will restructure. Maybe Minka would restructure to get Justin Jefferson. Those are team guys. I think they would if they knew they were going to get Justin Jefferson. But then, you're also predicating that on paying your quarterbacks nothing. And Russell Wilson to Justin Jefferson, he might be very cool with that. But unnamed draft pick Kenny Pickett in 2025, if they can't bring Wilson back, and if let's be honest, if you have Justin Jefferson, you can't afford to pay Russell Wilson $40 million. So unless he's willing to take a real bargain basement deal.
Well, what you can do is, you could just roll into like a signing bonus, which that helps a whole lot.
But that gets prorated over the contract.
What's that?
That gets prorated over the contract. So if you sign him to a 4-year deal and you give him, $150 million over 4 years, and you guarantee, let's say, 100, and give him a $75 million signing bonus, they just split that signing bonus over those 4 years.
And I could see, TJ Watt giving a little discount. I could see that.
You'd have to give him a big discount to afford it.
Yeah.
It really comes back to the quarterback, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't know, Leanne, if you think we can find quarterbacks for under $5 million to throw to Justin Jefferson and George Pickens. I sure don't.
Now, I agree with you, and I don't see Justin Jefferson being dying to come into a team with two kind of unknown quarterbacks in our current situation. It's not like we've got Tom Brady and we just need the wide receiver to make the magic happen. Do you know what I mean? We're a little bit still up in the air. We don't even know who's going to be quarterback when the season starts. I mean, they're talking about a competition. So is that really a situation Justin Jefferson wants to go into? I think he wants a Super Bowl ring. And I think, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? But then the other thing is that I feel like the Steelers are so good at finding and developing wide receivers. Paying a wide receiver that much money always feels like a tough pill to swallow for me. Do you know what I mean? He's really good, but he's not like Antonio Brown good. And so I just have a hard time envisioning paying somebody that much money when we seem to do so well finding other guys.
Leanne, you brought up something pretty interesting about the wide receivers drafting wise. Again, Ray Fittipaldo, he wrote an article in the Post-Gazette about the Steelers may need to think of a different way to draft receivers because, and it's like a pattern. AB, Martavis Bryant, Claypool, and now Diontae Johnson. And so, it's like they get this little pissy attitude and they're gone. So, and I'm sure Justin Jefferson does have a little bit of arrogance within him. I know for a fact.
That's not the book on him. He coexisted pretty well with Jamar Chase. I know the rumor earlier in the week was that the Bengals were going to try to trade for Justin Jefferson, which would be an absolute nightmare. I don't even understand how they could fit T. Higgins, Justin Jefferson, and Jamar Chase on the roster. But I guess with the franchise tag and maybe doing some creative accounting, they could figure out a way for a year. But there's no way they could afford to keep those three. But then again, with 1 year and a healthy Joe Burrow, there's no way anybody could stop that offense. That's a ridiculous passing offense, and maybe that's why they let Joe Mixon go. But I can't see Cincinnati pulling that off. Jefferson is at worst, the second best receiver in the NFL, and arguably he's the best receiver in the NFL. He's unguardable. I mean, double teams, triple teams, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And it's just, going back to the Steelers wide receivers since Antonio Brown, Martavis Bryant, Diontae Johnson, some of the other guys, these guys have hit for a year or two. Claypool had a good year, and then he kind of went, but it keeps that position very cheap. Steelers have only had, well, with Diontae now, 3 guys sign a second contract as a wide receiver.
Right.
So this whole Pittsburgh finds great wide receivers. Pittsburgh's system produces great wide receivers. When they go elsewhere, they don't do so great. I mean, Mike Wallace did pretty well. Emmanuel Sanders did pretty well, but those aren't top of the league all-pro guys. And then, Martavis Bryant, yeah, he had the problems. If he was playing now, he probably would have never got suspended, just like Josh Gordon.
Yes.
So it's hard to say. But then again, look, if we can get 2 or 3 years of top value production for very little money, because they don't pick these guys in the first round, they get them in the second or third round.
Yeah.
And then when it comes time, hey, to pay you $20 million, hey, you got a 5-cent head. Get out of town. Go let somebody else pay you $20 million. We're going to go reach back in the draft and get another one. Look at Pickens. Pickens is just a all-world talent, but he's got some, he's a young kid. He gets upset. I love him, but I mean, he could very well find himself out of Pittsburgh in a couple of years playing somewhere else, and we're all going to regret watching him play somewhere else.
Right.
But from just from the mental standpoint, if he doesn't stop with the tirades, and I think getting rid of Diontae Johnson will help on that. I don't think he wanted to see Diontae Johnson gone, but there is no question right now Pickens is the number one. I don't care who you bring in. You bring in, let's say, a guy like Tyler Boyd, who social media loves. Pittsburgh Steelers social media loves Tyler Boyd. Reality is he's a 30-year-old receiver who best part of his career is behind. But for what's still out there, Mike Williams is about the same age. He's always hurt. I think when they're both on the field, Mike Williams is 10 times better than he is. But Tyler Boyd maybe as a second receiver only until whoever you draft. And if you sign Tyler Boyd, that means probably not the first round, because you got to get a center, and I think you got to get JPJ at this point. Second, third, fourth round receiver comes in, who's kind of like a Pickens, who you see has talent. Tyler Boyd can play the number 2 until the rookie's ready to go to the number 2, and then Tyler Boyd is still a good option in the slot. I mean, he's not best option in the slot, but he's a good option in the slot. And, maybe you squeeze a year or 2 out of him. If he wants $25-30 million, I mean,
right,
not happening. Not happening.
Not
I don't know though that I agree with Ray on the Steelers drafting these wide receivers. I think it comes with the territory of the position to some degree. You're the player that is always out there, making all of these fantastic catches, scoring all of these points from a very young age. You're the player that gets a lot of attention heaped on you. I mean, second only to the quarterback. And so I think I don't want to call them head cases, but I do think it goes to their heads at some point. And I think it kind of comes with the position. I think they're showy and flashy, and they, like I said, they got a lot of attention, and they see that they're the ones scoring touchdowns for the most part, and so they perceive a certain value to themselves, and I think that adds to it. It's not like the Steelers wide receivers are unique and it's not happening anywhere else in the league. To me, it's the other way around. I think it happens everywhere, and the humble, quiet wide receivers are a little bit more of the anomaly.
Yeah. I totally agree, and like you said, it's the position. It's not just the Steelers.
Yeah.
I think the Steelers just do a good job of managing it, where they say, okay, and I wonder how much of this, and I'm going to make fun of Pat Pete a little bit here. So this morning when he's on Good Morning Football, he called Ben Roethlisberger. And I think it was like a Freudian slip because he had the noodle arm the last year.
Yeah.
But I wonder how much of it was Ben making these, receivers especially after Antonio Brown, all the way up and through Diontae and Chase Claypool. How much of it was Ben just making those guys look all world because he was putting them in positions to succeed. And Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky and Mason Rudolph just weren't capable of giving those guys the same opportunity. Part of Diontae, I think, is, especially the year with no touchdowns, was, and I really felt towards the end of the year, they were forcing him the ball in the red zone, trying to get him a touchdown to the detriment of the team.
Right.
Yes.
Yes, they were. Yes. Well,
So
and now, like I said, we got Chef Russ. He's going to. I think he'll throw at least 30 touchdowns this coming season.
I'm gonna go with Jason Kelsey on this one. We want game manager Russ. Chef Russ, no. Game manager Russ, yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think that, to your point about Ben, I think that Ben built a lot of trust with these receivers. If he was throwing the ball somewhere, they knew the ball was going to be where he said it was going to be. Do you know what I mean? He could read that field. He could see what was happening. He could anticipate danger. And I just think that there was almost an immediate level of trust that goes in with a quarterback like him, even for new wide receivers, because you knew what he could do. And I think that that's something that's definitely been lacking with Kenny. Do you know what I mean? And maybe that's not even Kenny's fault. Maybe that's just part of being a rookie and getting adjusted to the pros, but it doesn't change the outcome.
Yeah.
And it could really help Pickens develop a real nice bond with Russell Wilson because of the accuracy of his deep ball. Pickens has had to make some ridiculous catches, reaching, behind him, out of bounds.
Bending backwards and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, there have been some acrobatic, and I don't think he's going to need to do that anymore. And I think in training camp, he's going to find himself pleasantly surprised that instead of fighting with Joey Porter to jump over him and kind of push him aside and catch the ball with one hand, he's going to run by Joey Porter and catch it with two hands headed for the end zone.
Yeah.
Guys, the combine came by and is gone. Now we're looking forward to the draft. And we want to talk about draft strategy. And this is where the fan will talk to the insider. In your opinion, what is Pittsburgh's draft strategy? And should they, it's gonna be a two-part question. What's the draft strategy? And two, should they give up a lot of picks to get that one player that they really need? Leanne, you go first.
Oh boy, I was going to say, Bob, you go ahead. You love the draft. I think the Steelers have always had a draft strategy of best player available within the umbrella of what we need. And I agree with Bob said earlier. I think as things stand right now, without any significant changes, I think the piece that is missing most is a center. I think we need a great center. So I think we have to look to bring hopefully Powers Johnson on board with the team. And I think, that seems like a good fit. I like the kid from West Virginia too, Frazier. But so I think that's where we've got to start. And then I think from there, we got to look at some of these other gaps that we have to fill in. That's another cornerback, wide receiver, somebody on the defensive line, and look at some of those players. I think, we've obviously got some positions where it feels like we're pretty good on, as far as, tight end and running back. I don't think we're looking in those areas. And then hopefully find a quarterback somewhere kind of late-ish, in the draft that makes sense for the team. I would prefer not to see them give up a whole bunch of picks for somebody. I don't know who that person would be that I would want to see us give up draft capital to go get. I could see maybe something like we did with Broderick Jones, where you move down a few, say you're looking at that Amarius Mims and you want to move down a few spots so you could jump over Cincinnati and get him. Something like that makes sense to me. But, we're not going after one of those top quarterbacks. I don't want to give up a whole lot. We have too many needs.
Well, the Justin Jefferson rumor would have us giving up at least 2 first rounds and probably more. For somebody like that, okay, maybe. As far as the draft goes, I think I think now that we've missed out on all the top centers in free agency, and I don't know that it could have been the plan all along. As I missed out is probably a strong word. Connor Williams is coming off of a pretty bad knee injury. If he's healthy, he was probably the best free agent center available. So, and he's still out there. They could get him, but in my opinion, based on what they've done in free agency so far, you have to get Jackson Powers Johnson, and I'll tell you why. It's not that I don't like Zach Frazier. It's not that I don't love Cedric Van Pran, but the reality is that JPJ is going to go in the top somewhere between 15 and 20. He's not going to get past us. I don't think. And there's real possibility that Cincinnati takes him at 18. So we have to probably jump ahead of them. The reason for that is I think Zach Frazier is either going to go to Green Bay at the end of the first round or very early in the second when they have another pick, which leaves us at 51 with Cedric Van Pran, who I like. I would before the year and until I really watched a lot more film on JPJ, I would have said he was the best center in the draft ahead of Zach Frazier. But if we have to take Van Pran at 51, and we will have to take him if we don't get anybody, because you got to have a starter. And nobody else outside of those top three, to me, is a starter. Maybe Zimmer from Arkansas. Maybe.
It's a stretch.
But, yeah, but you're picking Van Pran in the second. Now you're reaching because of positional need. You're taking him 30 spots ahead of where he should go.
Yeah.
And I'm scared that I don't think Omar Khan and Andy Weidel are going to operate that way. I think they're going to go get the best possible choice and figure out a way to move up to ensure that. Or if they get some buzz that, okay, Cincinnati's going to go Mims over Johnson, even then you're taking a big risk, because if you let Johnson go, if you don't trade up to get him, if you let Johnson go, you're not going to get Zach Frazier unless you can figure out a way to trade into the end of the first round or before Green Bay in the second. And then you're stuck. I mean, there's not a lot of good options out there unless, and I kind of mentioned this in the Steeler Nation chat today, and Omar Khan, full disclosure, Omar Khan has shot this down. Brian Baldinger, NFL Network, insists every time he talks to somebody on Steelers about the offensive line, he mentions this. James Daniels is a better center than guard to him. Now, if they do that, they move James Daniels over out of necessity, because I don't think the only way they consider that is if they miss JPJ, Zach Frazier goes.
Yeah.
They're going to roll the dice to get Van Pran in the right spot in the third round. And if they do, great, he's their starter. Everybody's happy. If they don't, I'm starting to think the backup plan might just be Daniels or Nick Herbig, or Nate Herbig moving over to center, and maybe draft a guy like Cooper Beebe, who I was super high on last year, and I think he's cost himself a ton of money by going back to Kansas State. I think he went from a late first, early second to a fourth round pick. If we could get Cooper Beebe in the fourth round to play guard, and he's also he's a capable swing tackle. He's a guard in the NFL. He was a tackle initially at Kansas State, but he moved inside to guard this year. Cooper Beebe is a really good option. I think he's an upgrade over Daniels at guard. And if Daniels is what Baldinger says he is, then maybe that's a viable plan for the Steelers in the draft. As far as wide receiver goes, Odunze, Brian Thomas, I like those guys, but I just don't see the Steelers using a first round pick. I mean, Santonio Holmes and Plaxico Burress are the only two this century that they picked in the first round. So, I mean, I think that's what we're looking at. I think you have to do what you have to do to get JPJ at this point.
Right. Now, of course, as we get closer to the draft, we're going to have our own mock draft. And so, again, this will be nice. And so, to the audience out there, please send us your mock draft also, again, at 6steelcrings@yahoo.com, and we will discuss it as well. So again, guys, like I said, I'm pleased with what I'm seeing right now. Again, it's just a matter of getting through the draft and start putting the pieces in place.
Let me ask you guys a question, because Bill Cowher, or I'm sorry, Jerome Bettis was on the Dan Patrick show yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to the Russell Wilson thing, Jerome Bettis thinks that they got Russell Wilson because Mike Tomlin's on the hot seat. What do you guys think about that?
I don't think Mike Tomlin's on the hot seat. I don't think he's ever been on the hot seat. I think that that's a figment of the imagination of fans who want him to be on the hot seat. I just don't, to me, it just doesn't feel like the Steelers organization has ever operated that way, not in a very long time, with the like threats and veiled threats. And I just don't see it. I think if he was really on the hot seat, I think he'd be gone. So, I think that there was some additional like looks, do you know what I mean? And maybe some conversations that happened. Sure. But I think that's normal in the course of any career, that, sometimes you have better years than others. And there was conversations about, improving and winning playoff games.
Well, I mean, as far as Mike Tomlin, to me, again, I'm not worried about that. Really. The slightest mistake, and again, people are coming out, and with the lynch mob, fire Tomlin,
Yeah.
Again, they don't know the full reason why that decision been made. Now, of course, I do believe it was the Buffalo playoff game, in late in the third quarter, late in the third quarter, it was 4th down. Pittsburgh had to go for it, And some folks say, well, punt the ball. No, you sometimes you gotta go for it, because everybody knew that, once they punt the ball, get back to Josh Allen, he was going to milk the clock. Yeah. So, you had to step out on faith right there and try to move the chains and try to score. Unfortunately, they lost by 2 touchdowns.
I think there's a segment of our population that are constantly looking for something to say something negative about Mike Tomlin. And I'm not saying that he is above reproach. I'm not saying that some of the criticism isn't warranted. I definitely think it is, but I think there's some very loud voices that look for everything negative to say and scream it over and over again, because there's also the Mike Tomlin good side that, Patrick Queen and Russell Wilson both said he's one of the top reasons why they chose to come to Pittsburgh. Do you know what I mean? They wanted to play for Tomlin, and this is something we've heard over and over again. And I would think that, this is your livelihood. For Russell Wilson, this is his second chance. If you thought Tomlin was some terrible coach, why would you hang your star to his and take that chance? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
The player's coach,
I don't think
nonsense.
Well, one thing I want to interject, though, if it was Mark Madden, Filipponi, Fittipaldo,
Yeah.
Dulac, I might say, yeah, it's hyperbole, but this is Jerome Bettis we're talking about.
Yeah. It is slightly more interesting from Bettis.
Steelers haven't fired a coach since 1968. They're not going to start with Tomlin. They're not going to fire him. I mean, I personally find it interesting that Art Rooney said he's getting an extension, and here it is, free agency is going on, and he doesn't have one. I still think he'll get.
And he's on his contract, right?
But they don't ever do it until like what, August or something? Isn't that when they usually do it? Is it August?
Well, usually they do it a year before. This is him going into the expiring year. And I want to be clear, they're probably going to do it. I mean, the theory was they wouldn't get a good offensive coordinator if they didn't extend him. They got Arthur Smith very quickly before the extension. I still think it's going to happen. It's probably a week and they'll announce it. But let's be realistic. I mean, at some point, it's not a matter of negativity. You can like the guy, but the reality is, and I find it very interesting that now you got Jerome Bettis adding his voice to, Kyle Brandt, who went on the rant about no playoff wins in 7 years. And now Colin Cowherd has brought that up recently. I think the winning season that kind of the national media ran with for so long. I think as the Steelers struggled during that stretch with Arizona and New England, and then rallied to make the playoffs, and everybody was like, "Oh, phew, see, Tomlin, he's." But I think there was some real soul searching going on there. Is, hey, should we really be trotting this out as the Steelers haven't had a losing season in 20 years?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, you whip-de-doo, you're not competitive. No Steeler coach, no Steeler head coach has ever been hired by another team to coach to become a head coach. That's nobody. Noel was at the end of his end of his coaching life when he retired. Cowher threatened to come back many times, but he didn't.
Yeah, never did.
This
He
whole
could have. He
Tomlin,
would have gotten hired. He would have gotten
I
hired.
think, yeah, I think there was real interest in bringing Cowher
Yeah.
back, but I mean, ultimately, he decided not to, and I don't know if that was just because, hey, I'm having too much fun in TV, or hey, do I really want to go work for an organization that may not be as dedicated to winning as I had it with the Steelers? I mean, yes, are our facilities the best? No. Is our stadium the best? No. Do we pay our players the most? No. But there's no doubt that, or at least there wasn't when Cowher was coaching, there was no doubt we're trying to win. I don't think
Well,
Tomlin's not trying to win. I think he's doing the best he can,
right.
but it's a different organization at this point.
Bob, I believe that, we mentioned Bill Cowher. I believe that, again, you got to factor in his wife passing away.
Well, one thing you got to remember, Ray, is yes, the wife
Yeah.
at the end, but in 2000, you couldn't find a Steeler fan who didn't want him fired, because 3 consecutive years without the playoffs,
Yeah.
6-win seasons,
Right.
they were
It was
terrible.
16, yeah.
But 2001, after
Which is what always conveniently gets forgotten when all the anti-Tomlin people, are shouting from the rooftops about how Cowher was the greatest coach. They forget that we went through some really rocky periods with Cowher too, and Noel. There's been no perfect coach ever. Do you know what I mean? I guess if you want to look at winning seasons as your benchmark, then yeah, that's Tomlin. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's Cowher and Noel too. But now, Noel, the thing about Noel, and Noel had his down period. Noel was fired in '88.
Yes.
He wanted to quit. Dan Rooney wanted to fire him. Mean Joe Green got them both in a room because he was the defensive line coach, and said, "Talk it out. You're not firing Chuck. Chuck, you're not quitting. Figure this out." They extended him for 3 years. They said, "Chuck, we're firing everybody. You have no say. This is the deal. I'll give you 3 more years at the team. I hire the coaches for you for the rest of the time." And we went from a terrible year in '88 to the playoffs in '89.
Gosh.
And I always say, when people look back at kind of the end of Noel, and they romanticize, they say, hey, the '80s teams were terrible, and if you didn't fire Noel, you can't fire Tomlin when he's winning. Well, the '80s teams, a lot of them were bad, but they pulled off some pretty magical playoff upsets. I mean, they only won 2 playoff games in the '80s, and it was kind of spaced out just right to where the fans did not go over the top on Noel. The upset against Denver, when they beat the Raiders to make the playoffs in 83, 84, and then it was the highest scoring AFC championship game. I mean, that there was some real Pollard just dominated running the ball against Elway. They really beat up Denver. And then, first half, they were very competitive with the Dolphins before Marino's Dolphins pulled them away.
Yes, they were.
They went down 2 or 3 years, but then all of a sudden, scrappy Merrill Hodge, like scrappy Frank Pollard, you get in, and I mean, younger fans don't understand how much Chuck Noll and Jerry Glanville hated each other, and the franchises hated each other. The fact that we beat Houston in that wild card game and rubbed his nose in it as Noel's last playoff victory.
Yeah.
I've heard Hodge talk about how sweet that was and how much they wanted to win that game for Noel. And that's why, I kind of get when I hear all the Tomlin, and they blame it on, well, you didn't want Noel fired, you didn't want Cowher fired. Yes, we did. Trust
At
me.
times they did. At times they did. At
Yeah,
times they haven't wanted Tomlin fired either. Do you know what I mean? It's the nature of the business.
Yeah.
Unless you're riding some high like, Andy Reid is or something, or Bill Belichick was in New England with Tom Brady, unless you're riding that high where you're constantly making the Super Bowl, there's always going to be talk. I mean, it's every team in the NFL goes through periods where the world is coming to an end and they hate their coach and their quarterback is terrible. I mean, it's look at the transformation Miami has had, and I'm down here in South Florida, and they hate Miami. They hate McDonald. They hate I mean, it's everybody is mad about everything, and so it's that same kind of.
You mentioned Andy Reid. Look at Andy Reid, Leanne. Philadelphia.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that long ago they
ran him out of
fired Andy
town.
Reid.
Yeah, ran him out of town. Yeah, I mean, so it's the kind of business it is.
And we're talking about the same franchise that booed Santa Claus. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. That's right. They did.
Yeah.
I mean, Art Rooney let's just face it, he's at the end of the line. He should really, I mean, unless there is something behind the scenes with Daniel that we just don't know, it's time to turn it over and just kind of get a new voice and I think Omar Khan is kind of this, is where he's doing things differently and saying, hey, Art, you brought me in for a reason. And let's face it, I'm going to be here longer than you are at this point. So we're going to kind of do things a little bit differently. Yeah. And the tinfoil hat in me is, Russell Wilson and Mike Tomlin drove that move. If Russell Wilson doesn't work out, and let's say we have a terrible year, and let's be honest, the terrible year is 8-9, 9-8 at this point. Right. We're not going to be really much worse than that. Is maybe, or maybe they given Tomlin the rope to say, okay, Mike, you can have a little more say in the personnel we're bringing in. If it doesn't work, though, if you don't start winning playoff games, we let you slide. It's been 7 years. I mean, at some point you have to say,
agreed.
This is the Steelers. We don't go for 10 years without winning a playoff game. The standard is the standard, and the Super Bowl is the standard.
And Bob, to add to that, there has to be some player accountability. Has to be. And again, that's the problem, I do have with some of these folks, on social media and the Facebook pages. They just, again, everything goes wrong. It's Tomlin's fault. Just like the Cleveland playoff game, Baker Mayfield.
But Ray, the head coach is responsible. That's the nature of that's the
Buck
game.
Stops.
I mean, if you want to be the head coach, you got to be responsible. You can't turn around and say, well, my quarterback made a dumb play.
Well, okay? No. But see, but wait a minute. Now, Mike Tomlin, he's not going to throw his players under the bus. He's not going to do that. And again, he's very professional, and I believe he's one of the favorite coaches in the league because again.
But how are you going to have player accountability if you don't do that?
Well, I believe.
I think there's a balance there. There's a balance. There's a balance there.
There's a balance. Yes.
Kenny didn't have a great game, and my play calling or accountability for keeping Matt Canada for too long. Do you know what I mean? Owning that stuff, that falls on Tomlin. Do you know what I mean? But the execution part of it does fall on the players. And I think, you don't want to throw somebody under the bus, but it's just honest to say somebody didn't have a great game. Do you know what I mean? Our defense didn't do it today. The offense wasn't able to move the ball, Well,
like the Colts game when they asked him after the game and said, hey, how come you didn't let Boswell make it a one-score game? Oh, I was disgusted with Mitch. Okay, well, you didn't have any trouble calling Mitch Trubisky out. So I think there is a way to do it. And I think a lot of coaches, I think it's a last resort to call your players out in public. Yeah. But there is no seeming, and there hasn't been for a long time. People say it behind the scenes, it's different. But, I mean, let's face it. If all the stuff about Antonio Brown came out after he left, and, hey, I'm missing meetings, I'm doing this, and, hey, there's a different set of rules for guys like, I mean, should he have, maybe sat down Roethlisberger after the first time he called out a teammate? Yeah, he probably should have. He probably should have sat him down for a week. Said, Ben, we're not going to operate that way. You're our franchise quarterback, but there's consequences here. Or, hey, Ben, no problem. You're starting. You're not getting paid this week. We're taking a game check from you. I mean, there are ways you can do it behind the scenes. I mean,
The players
the
all
NFL
say that in team meetings, he pulls up film and he, in front of everybody, points out mistakes you've made, you know what I mean? Things that you did wrong. He has no problem pointing those things out in front of everybody. I've heard numerous players talk about how embarrassing it is. You know, you have this bad game and you already feel down, and then you get into film study and there's Tomlin at the front of the room with you blown up on the screen, you know, missing a tackle or something. And they have also talked about how he's quick to find players, you know, behind the scenes. That's something that, you know, they don't talk about publicly. So I hope those things are true. I hope that it's, you know, I hope that he does treat everybody equally and there isn't a different set of rules for a Ben Roethlisberger or an Antonio Brown. Although I think that by nature in football, I think that happens sometimes, whether you mean it to or not. Because what are you going to do? You know what I mean? You're not going to not win a game to prove a point to Antonio Brown.
Right. And that's all sports and frankly, in all professions.
Yeah.
If you got a top of the line producer, you treat that person differently than you treat the average worker bee. It's just human nature. Now, that being said, you know, at some point you do have to, you know, and this really kind of, and this is at least they're doing something a little bit different, because up until Omar with Colbert and Tomlin, it was the same old song. You get a non-impact free agent, you run it back with the same old group of guys. It's different under Omar, and Omar could really be the guy to rejuvenate Tomlin. I think they want to rejuvenate Russell Wilson. They got to rejuvenate Tomlin too. I mean, let's face it.
And I believe it will. I believe the first two
got to win playoff games. He's got to.
The first two picks, to me, I believe will determine the rejuvenation of Mike Tomlin. We'll see. We'll see.
Well, let's be honest, right? If they go 12-5 and win the AFC North and lose in the divisional round, it's all going to break loose again. It's going to be, and a lot of it will be how they lose.
Yeah.
But you know,
they got to win a playoff game. I don't care if it's a wild card game. I don't care how you get there, but they got to win a playoff game.
And I'm sure,
or it's got to really look radically different all year to the point where, okay, we see it now. We've got something going for the future.
Yeah.
Well, guys, another episode in the books.
Woo!
Great talk here.
Yeah.
Great talk. Yes. Now, before I close things out, what should you do again, Bob?
Like, share, subscribe.
All right. Lan, what were you supposed to do?
Like, share, and subscribe, and send us an email if you have anything you want us to talk about.
Right. 6steelcityrings@yahoo.com, which is red on the bottom of the screen. That's our email address. Leanne, Bob, hey, I want to thank you all for coming on the show again.
Thanks, Ray.
You all take care. We'll be back next week.
Sounds good.